Hello, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. My name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel here on the world of YouTube. Delighted to have you on board for another educational series here. So this is a wine channel designed to help those of you studying the world of wine to get more from it, greater understanding, of course, so you can take your examinations with confidence and pass them very, very well. This is a series for the wines of the world. That's the D3 section of the WSET Level 4. That's the diploma, the challenging diploma. This is on the southwest of France, and this is the beginning of all the series of the southwest of France. So this is series 1 on the Dordogne AOCs. And on this section, it's split into 4 series, as you can see there, across southwest of France. But in this series, it's split into 4 parts. So we're going to begin with an introduction, but actually looking at the history of the southwest of France as a whole, as this is the beginning point of the southwest of France, before going into the AOCs such as Bergerac, Montbazillac, and the other AOCs. This part is available as free content on the world of YouTube. It has things like advertising, whereas parts 2, 3, and 4 are only available on my e-learning portal over at www.winewithjimmy.com, where it is ad-free and there's lots of exclusive content and things to help you through your examinations. Any comments, questions, or concerns, please do get in touch. You can do so by commenting on this video below. Please make sure you click like and subscribe whilst you are down there. Please utilize the social media at the bottom of every slide, all of those handles, if you are that way inclined. So let's look at an introduction to the southwest of France and a history of this area. So there is the map to begin with. So the southwest of France is a huge area. As you can see from this map, it actually doesn't do it justice. It really covers quite a large swathe of France in this southwesterly corner. It covers a number of appellations, with the exception of Bordeaux. And Bordeaux sits up here, so just to the west of Bergerac, and the Marmande up here, just the north of that area. So it's this area. So exclude the Bordeaux section. The climate here is typically similar to Bordeaux, in the sense that this big blue arrow is the effect of the Atlantic. So we have a similar effect. Now, typically speaking, places across the southwest of France generally are warmer. And that's due to the fact that there is more of a buffer between this effect of the Atlantic and the vineyards in comparison to Bordeaux. So there's often a little bit more warmth in the area. South of Bordeaux, and this is going down here to what's called the Chalosse here, but places like Madaran, and then in the Bern area, places like Jurançon and Iruligi in the Basque country, you have certainly the effect of the Atlantic in these areas. So it does have a kind of similarity to what Bordeaux may have. Elsewhere, the Atlantic influence, as I mentioned, diminishes with greater distance from the Atlantic, like Cahors. Please don't pronounce the H. You get a lot of very annoyed French people if you pronounce the H of Cahors. It is, much more drier and warmer in comparison to those places that are coastal. To give you the example, Cahors is actually 200 millimeters of rainfall less than Bordeaux, which sits around 900 millimeters of rain per year. So about 700 in Cahors, for example. Large volumes of wine are made here in both PDO and PGI. You're looking at a total of the southwest of France of somewhere around 60,000 hectares, which makes it about half the size of Bordeaux. And that's quite crazy to think about, seeing as Bordeaux is just one very concentrated area. It's twice the size as all of this in terms of vineyards, which is quite crazy. It's one of the most underpopulated parts of France. So it's quite sparse in areas here, certainly when we get down to the Pyrenees. And there's lots of rivers in play. We'll talk about things like the Dordogne. We'll talk about things like the Lot, the Tarn, and we'll also talk about the Garonne that runs up here as well. So quite a few of those rivers in play in this area. Let's move on to a little bit around the history of the Southwest to begin with. So this area was probably first cultivated with some sporadic viticulture by Celtic tribes. It's more than likely, but more kind of structured, systematic viticulture would have been instigated by the Romans from around the 1st century BC. And we do have references to wine, certainly more of Bordeaux, from poets and polymaths like Ausonius, for example. So a little bit of ancient history there. Of course, the Western Roman Empire collapses completely at the end of the 5th century in 476. And then we have, as with elsewhere in France and other parts of Europe, the rise of the church. So many abbeys, monasteries, cathedrals, and churches being erected all around Western Europe and Central Europe. And this is really because of the rise of Catholicism and the kind of power of the Pope at that time. So you'll see here, this is actually in Gaillac, which is, if any of you sort of eagle-eyed people on, the first picture of this presentation was also Gaillac. It was actually the same abbey. So that's not fitting in terms of Dordogne that we are in terms of this series, but we're actually just using this as an introduction to the southwest of France. So Abbey Saint-Michel in Gaillac is here. So we'll talk a little bit about Gaillac at a later time. Then the Middle Ages. So during the Middle Ages, Gascony, which we find is a major part here of the Southwest, was incorporated into the territory of Aquitaine, as it says down here at the bottom. And this was under the umbrella of English rule for just over 300 years. This is due to the marriage of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henri Plantagenet, Henri II, the Count of Anjou, King of England, where large swathes of the French land became under English control. So that happened for a few hundred years. One of the positives from this is that the port city of Bordeaux really started to grow with this influence of the British Empire. And the wines from southwest France would travel via boat up the rivers and the tributaries of the Dordogne and the Garonne to be sent to markets along the Atlantic coast. But this rarely happened. And that is because the Bordeaux producers would have the monopoly, really, because all of the rivers here, not all of them, but a big majority of the rivers lead into the Garonne, which leads into the Gironde of Bordeaux. So everything had to get funneled through Bordeaux. And of course, Bordeaux were protecting their own produce. Often a lot of the wines that would come up from this area in the southwest would be repackaged and sold as Bordeaux, just one of the casks, if it said something like a wine of Bergerac on it, rub it out, put something like Bordeaux on the front of it. All the wines were blended into Bordeaux wines quite crazily. Now, Bordeaux's wine production really did boom from this monopoly in step with its port. And by the 13th and 14th century, Bordeaux wine merchants actually saw their southern neighbors as a threat to their economic interests. And there was actually protectionist laws set in. There was mandated laws that no wines from the southwest could be sold until all of the wines of Bordeaux had been purchased and sent to market. So southwest wines had to take a second place behind that of Bordeaux. And really, this really put the quite viable industry of Southwest to the sword, and it really decreased it and diminished it, of course. With no access to the wider world, grape growers and winemakers can only produce wine really for the local market. And this is all pre-Canal du Midi, so not connecting it to the south of France at that time. The protectionist policies were actually rescinded finally in 1776, but not after many hundreds of years of dominating factions of Bordeaux. And although the region of the southwest started to rebound in the late 1700s due to the rescindance of those protectionist policies, there was problems. There was socio-economical factors, there was economic collapse, and of course there were wars. And certainly these really slowed down any kind of growth of southwest France. And this is still the shadow that Bordeaux casts over the southwest, despite the fact there are no protectionist laws that benefit Bordeaux over the southwest today. Still, we have that dominating force of Bordeaux, which has been a powerhouse in the French Empire, the Dutch Empire, the English, the British Empire. And the southwest have always taken a second fiddle. So maybe they're emerging today, but still in the shadow of Bordeaux, of course. And it's quite interesting because, in fact, many of the wine styles, some of the big structured tannic reds here, are fairly comparable to that of Bordeaux, and often actually better value for money. So it's some place really that you should spend time on. Certainly if you are looking for good value for money, maybe you are purchasing for a wine bar or a restaurant. It's an area where you can find really good, rustic, but well-made wines that certainly are good value for money. One of the key moments I really want to mention here in the southwest of France is a really, really important climatic date. And that is the 1956 winter freeze, so 1955-56 winter freeze. So in February of 1956, for around 3 whole weeks, the temperatures in Bordeaux were bitterly cold. Now, this is a very rough temperature map to give you an idea of the winter freeze. So you'll see this is Europe and the outline of Europe here. Even in Britain. So in Britain, we're seeing temperatures of around minus 15 degrees Celsius for 3 weeks. And that continued down here across all of this Western Europe, as you can see, and even into the southwest of France. So why is this important? Well, it's important because this is a climatic point in time, which doesn't happen that much. It tends to happen every few hundred years or so. This was 1956. Now, vineyards in Germany and Austria would very much be able to survive these bitterly cold winters, most of them, because they have vines which are more adaptable to these cold conditions, like Riesling, for example. But the southwest, this is unheard of. To go down to minus 20 degrees Celsius for a prolonged period of time was an extremely problematic time. And varieties such as Malbec do not survive very well in these bitterly cold winters. Hence why they're placed down in the southwest of France normally, because this is an area that tends to be warm and moderated by the Atlantic. So this temperature was very, very, very cold. Malbec very much suffered. In fact, nearly all the Malbec perished. Key moment in time because one AOC decided to replant with Malbec despite the fact that it just been wiped out, and that was Gaul. And that's why today that has the oldest Malbec vines in the region at about 70 years old. But elsewhere, in all our other parts of Bergerac, Marmande, places like the Lot and Tarn areas, replanted with other varieties which were more capable at surviving those conditions just in case they happened again. Feur Cervidou, the Cabernets, Merlot, etc. So yeah, the winter freeze, a big moment in time, and the moment really why today we don't have that much Malbec in the southwest of France compared to once what we did have. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this introduction to the southwest, the history leading up to that winter freeze. I hope you've enjoyed that bit of information far above and beyond your WSET Level 4 syllabus. Please do join me for part 2 on Bergerac. So the AOC Bergerac, important, of course, on the Dordogne area. So we're looking at Dordogne AOCs here, remember. So Bergerac AOC. That part, along with 3 and 4, is only available on my e-learning portal. You have to go and visit www.winewithjimmy.com to gather more information and subscribe. Please do get in touch if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. You can do so by commenting on this video below, clicking like or subscribe. And make sure, if you are a social media fiend, make sure you tag us in all of your studies with our handles at the bottom of every slide. And if you're in London, of course, come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.